All right, guys, so let's give this a try for the first time. We're going to do a screencast and kind of go from there. All right, and what we're going to do is look at key map features. Right? So today's 9th September 2020. You can see a cool old school map in the back, right? If you look over in the kind of in the background, you can see that they didn't know much about North America, so that's always interesting, right? And so for a do now, which you did on Google Forms, right, you kind of had two questions. The first being when you hear the word map, what comes to your mind? And the second is what kind of map information, can a map tell you? And, maps can be all kinds of things. Sometimes they're just, straight up old school political maps that show you boundaries in cities and towns. Sometimes it can be, geographical maps that show you mountains, hills, streams, anything like that. And then there's kind of these funky maps, right? And if you look on the slide right here, you can see kind of a funky map. And if you look, everything is distorted, right? That's the United States. But you can see that some states are like kind of bent out of shape. Looks like you're looking at like a funhouse mirror. And the reason being is this map shows you the population relative to the size, right? So sometimes really big states like Nebraska, which is kind of squeezed over on the side to the left side, have really small populations. So on the map, it appears much bigger. Sometimes kind of medium-sized states like Georgia in the bottom right look a little bit bigger because of their population. And some states like Texas look relatively normal. Their population and their square area are about, proportional where they should be. Right? So we're going to talk about some key map features and kind of what information we can gain and what we'll be using them most for. Right? So all good maps have different parts, right? The first part being a title. Map titles are important. They let you know what is on the map, right? If we're looking through a history book and we're looking for maps of, say, colonial America, we're not going to stop at a map that says, Europe. If we are looking for maps of, say, Asia, we're not going to stop at South America, right? So good map titles will describe accurately what you're looking at, right? Just like any title of anything, a movie, a book, anything worthwhile will be titled well, right? The next is a key, and we're going to see that. A key is on a map. It's usually in one of the corners, especially if there's like a large body of water or an ocean. The map key will get stuck over there. And what it does is it lets you know what symbols and colors on a map mean. Right? Really common ones that you see is green is land, usually relatively flat land. Brown tends to be mountains or hillier areas. And then shades of blue, the darker the blue, the deeper the water, the lighter the blue, the more shallow the water. Mm-hmm. And then we have a compass rose. Compass rose, or just a compass, shows you the cardinal directions. Now, if you remember, cardinal directions, northeast, west, and south, right? The news, they're always on there. Sometimes they might have like southwest, northwest, and that's fine. That's great additional information, but it will always have north, south, east, and west. At bare minimum, it may just have north with the assumption that your other directions based if north is indicated for you. The next is a grid. It can be a set of lines that show the coordinates on a map. Now, grids can be either longitude and latitude, which we will talk about, or sometimes, especially in like local atlases, it'll say like A to D across the top, and then 1 to 4 on the side. And then what you do is say, in A1 you can find this town or this street, this neighborhood. And C1 you can do the same, right? And that's simply with a grid. And then lastly, we have a scale. It shows you how big something is in real life, right? So a lot of times you'll see like 1 inch equals X number of miles, whether it be 5 miles, 10 miles, 1,000 miles, whatever it may be. It's all relative. If we're doing large areas, right, if we're doing continents, the entire planet, 1 inch will indicate a much larger distance than, say, if we were looking at a map of Ocean County or Bayville. Okay? So those are the key parts. Almost all good maps will have some of these. They may have additional information. They may have more information, but a good map will have these basic, facts. All right? So let's look at examples. All right, so here's a map of South America. You can see that it has a title, large letters, South America. You can see that it has on it a compass rose. It's over to the right of Brazil in the ocean. North is only indicated on there. We can see that it has a grid. It uses longitude and latitude, which we will talk about further. You can see them labeled on the left. Those are the lines of latitude. And then kind of towards the bottom of South America, you'll see 105 west, 90 west. Those are lines of longitude, which we will talk about. You have not a key on here. So you can, you could say, maybe you could provide a little bit more information. They might want to say gray. The gray countries indicate South American countries, something along those lines. And it's pretty much all that we have, right? Let's double check ourselves. And a scale. And if you look, the scale is to the right of Uruguay. You can see that on a piece of paper, it's about an inch, but about 1 inch equals 600 miles. Right? A little bit smaller area equals 600 kilometers. That way, because the United States uses what we call the imperial system, miles, feet, pounds, ounces. But almost every other country, only 2 other ones, but almost every other country uses the metric system, right? Based off hundreds and tens and ones, right? Very easy system. All of Europe, all of South America, pretty much all of Africa, they use a metric system, right? So we have that. So what is latitude? I said it already. Those are the lines on the left side of the screen. And what they do is they measure the distance from the North Pole to the South Pole. It's like all latitude, all longitude, they're all measured in degrees, right? And when you go to some smart people math, you'll probably learn about degrees, minutes, and seconds. Lines of longitude and latitude can be measured in those, but we are only going to ever talk about them in degrees. With the North Pole and the South Pole being 90 degrees, right? And then you count back to the middle of the planet, the equator, which is 0 degrees, right? So if you're picking up on the mathematical part of it, you'll notice that 90 plus 90 equals 180. The reason being is when you start going, if you were to count up one side of the globe, you would get to the top or the bottom, and then you start counting on the other side, and you're getting closer to that that 0 degree equator, and that would be another 180 degrees, and 180 plus 180 is 360, a perfect circular sphere. All right. Between the North Pole and South Pole, obviously not equally half, it's about roughly a quarter. You'll see that we have the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. These are the tropics. Anything between 23 north and 23 south are considered technically the tropics. Maybe we may describe somewhere as tropical, but in terms of actual geographic terms, Cancer and Capricorn at 23 north and south define the tropics. Okay. You can see on a map here, 60, 30, 0, 30, 60, counting back towards the poles to 90 at the poles. Obviously, Capricorn and Cancer are not marked on here, but if you look at the line between 30 and 0 on either direction, that's 15. So just above that and just below that, depending on which way from the equator you went, you'll see that's the tropical region. So a big swath of Africa, right, the large continent, more or less in the center, is within the tropics. A large portion of northern South America is in the tropics. And you'll also notice that almost none of the United States is within the tropics. The only truly tropical state is actually Hawaii, right? We don't consider Florida, despite we probably call it tropical, is not actually a tropic, right? Here's a good view of that too. You can see Hawaii kind of way over to the left, right? Basically where it says Tropic of Cancer on the way left. But you can see, like I said, much of Africa is within that red boundary. About a third of Australia, that yellow island to the bottom right, is within the tropics. Southern India, the country of like Vietnam, almost all of North America, all of Central America, those are all tropics, right? Within the tropics. If you look above it, or below it, right, you'll see the Arctic lines, right, or the Antarctic Circle. They're at 66 degrees north or south, and that's kind of, the true Arctic. So we might say, like, oh, wow, parts of Canada are really cold, but that's not truly an Arctic climate. All right, longitude, the ones that simply go the other direction, right? They go around the world from pole to pole, they run down the globe. Now we have 2 different key lines on there, right? The first one being the prime meridian. That is 0. If you've ever looked at a clock on a computer or like on a video game system, you'll notice that it may say plus or minus GMT. GMT means Greenwich Mean Time. Greenwich is an observatory in Greenwich, England. It is where the astronomical clock is kept. It's where we define time essentially from. Right? It's kind of like a crazy abstract concept. I'll post a little video about that so you guys have it on there. But what we'll see is, and it'll be with yours on it, but you'll see what the Observatory of Greenwich actually does. And we consider that prime meridian 0. But it's the same concept. We count out 0 all the way around in either direction. We get further away until we get to 180, which is once again the opposite side, right? So you got to think of spheres in 2 180 halves. And when we get to that other side, that is the international date line. That is where the day starts and stops. What I mean by that, there has to be a day that, there has to be a place where the day starts. And what we do is we start it and stop it kind of in the Pacific Ocean. Now you're going to see it's not a perfect line, and I'll explain why. Right. But there's the prime meridian splitting right down the middle of the globe. If you look at the N in meridian, right above it is the island of Great Britain, and that is where England is, and that is where the Greenwich Observatory is. Obviously, it continues all the way down to the North and South Poles. And here is the international date line. All right, now you're going to see 2 lines on the screen, right? The first is a black line. The other is kind of the red line. The red line is the international date line. Now, what you notice is if you start at the top of the screen, you come down, it kind of shoots out to the right and then back into the left. It's going around the far eastern tip of Siberia. Russia is huge. It spans 13 time zones. If you were to cut off Russia, even that little bit of a tip, think how weird that would be. It would be Monday in one part of it, but it would be Sunday in the rest of the country. It's really bad for business. It's really bad for government, right? Can you imagine if you went to Tom's River and it was the weekend, but it was Friday where for Babel? And so that kind of explains why the zigs and the zags in the line. It's to keep the areas on the same day. The one part that is really obvious, right below where it says international date line, there's a huge shootout, and it shoots out to the east it makes Tuesday bigger. The reason being is this: there are some really small countries in there. Places like Nauru, Tonga, Vanuatu, and they are heavily reliant on Australia and New Zealand for government and business services, banks especially. So what would happen is, if it were, say, Monday in Australia, New Zealand, but Sunday in Nauru, right, this little tiny country, well, they wouldn't be able to access banks because, Sunday's a bank holiday, or, banks are closed. Then you would go, fine, right? We could go on. It would be Monday in Nauru, Tuesday in Australia, Tuesday in Nauru, Wednesday in Australia, so on and so forth until we got to Friday in Nauru, but Saturday in Australia when a lot of businesses are closed. And so Nauru, which is super dependent, and Tonga and these other countries are super dependent on Australia and New Zealand, would only have 3 days a week in which they can conduct business and 4 that they couldn't. And that would be a huge issue. So what we kind of arbitrarily draw this line, and we include them to not cut them off. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we bring it back down and we include all of New Zealand. You can see New Zealand, the 2 kind of islands just above Tuesday, closer to the line than Australia. And that little country or island below Australia is Tasmania, part of Australia. And then we just bring the line straight down because the penguins in Antarctica aren't overly concerned whether it's Monday, Tuesday. They just want to go eat fish and swim in the ocean. All right. I've uploaded an assignment. Please do it. Like we talked about in class, kind of in class, kind of on Google Meet, kind of as I explained in your welcome letter. This is all new for all of us. All right. Be patient. If something doesn't work, let me know. If you're having questions or you're struggling with something, please let me know. There's also a video about the Greenwich Observatory. I'd like you to go ahead and check out and read. Or watch, and then kind of get a feel for it as well. All right. If you need your textbooks, I'm going to upload a few pages that may be helpful to you. And if not, don't worry about it. There's other resources online. You can Google things and things like that. All right. Let's use this time, though, to explain what to do if you Google something. Be careful, right? I know it's the internet and you can kind of find anything at any time, but it doesn't mean what you're finding is accurate or true. So you want to use reputable sites, right? You want to use sites that have a reputation that is good. You're going to want to find things that maybe end in .edu, right? Education.gov, or you may want to use like a trusted news source or a trusted site, New York Times, CNN, anything along Wall Street Journal, anything along those lines. Don't go to like Bob's blog and assume that Bob knows what he's talking about when it comes to the maps. All right. So go ahead and take care of those things. Like I said, if you have a question, ask me. If you're in class, raise your hand, get my attention. If you're at home, shoot me an email, make a comment in the class. Preferably email me, actually. Strike that, reverse that. make a comment. That way, if your question is something that someone else is, kind of wondering as well, I can answer there and it'll be visible for everybody else to see. All right. The last thing I want you to look at, the key questions from today, the key ideas. If you can't answer these 4 questions by the end of today, you have to go back. We have to talk about it. We have to get this down. These are the 4 things. You have to know the name of the lines that run north to south. You have to know the lines that run east to west. I made a double typo there. I'll go back and fix it. No worries. You're going to have to tell me what is the prime meridian. And you're going to have to be able to kind of describe roughly what the international daylight, or where, the international daylight is. All right. So hopefully that's it. Hopefully this works out. The first one of about 90-ish. And that is it. I'll talk to you guys.